crank up the energon because today we're spotlighting the comics that brought the Transformers to life on the page. From explosive first appearances to epic crossover clashes you might have forgotten about, we're digging into key issues that shape the battle between the Autobots and Decepticons, and we'll check out where these books stand in the aftermarket, how rare they are in the CGC census, and why they still matter to fans today. This is Transformers Spotlight. This Transformer Spotlight is brought to you by Global Comics, the place to read comics anytime, anywhere. Want to catch up on the latest Transformer stories? All you got to do is download the Global Comics app and start reading today. Whether you're into classic runs or the new Energon universe, it's all there waiting for you. No long boxes needed. If you use my special promo code, you get 33% off a yearly subscription. I'll see you there, and back to the show. What's going on, everybody? It's Izzy, and we have a very special presentation of Creator Spotlight today. We are going to be talking about the Transformers. I'm super stoked to talk about the Transformers because they are a special part of my childhood. I love the comic books. I love the toys. I had the toys. I watched the cartoons. Transformers, the movie, the animated movie, is by far the best movie in my opinion. And we'll talk a little bit more about the movies, everything else that goes along with it. But I cannot do this by myself. As you can see here, Shane did not make it the show, but that's okay. We're going to bring someone else into the party, and I think this is going to be a good one. So let's bring him to the party.
Welcome to the party, pal.
It's Eman, the C-list villain himself, rocking the Autobots shirt. You know you had to bring the PR in the house, didn't you?
This is the Filipino adobo, my friend. But yeah, it's all good. Our family, we're family, right?
We're all,
Puerto Rican, Mexican, Filipino. We all use adobo.
At the same time, though, man, a lot of Filipinos get mistaken for being Spanish too. So it's all right. We're all love, right?
It's all family. Look, we all got hurt by the Spaniards. It's okay. Like we're all family. It's a lineage.
We got the coast to coast going on here today. We got New York, we got Southern Cal, all that good stuff. Eman, I brought you in because I know your love for Transformers.
Oh God, you know how much I love it. I've loved it since 1984 and up until today and into the future for sure.
Tell me a little bit why you love Transformers so much before we even get to this little list here that we got.
So growing up, I was introduced to Japanese animation early on, and just transforming robots, seeing robots change from cars to robots and vehicle mode and whatnot. All of that has always captured my imagination. I've absolutely loved that. So when there was a regular cartoon of transforming robots coming in, I was like, that's cool. And then just getting to know the characters and loving Optimus Prime for what he is, noble, a strong leader. That's what I ended up gravitating towards. So when I saw the cartoon and I saw it was a regular thing in my childhood, I was like, I'm all about this right there. And then that was where my love for Transformers started, was 1984. I think I was in kindergarten. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think I was in kindergarten too. I'm probably a little older than you. I don't know.
We aged ourselves right there, man.
Yeah. But in 84, yes, I was into the Transformers. I watched all the episodes since I was a little kid. I enjoyed them. I watched them more than I did G.I. Joe. So, it was always G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, Thundercats in that order. And that's how my weekdays were, because they were weekday cartoons. They weren't Saturday morning cartoons. A lot of people thought they were Saturday morning cartoons, but they really were weekday shows, which made it even better because we got Transformers 5 days a week.
Exactly.
And that's what's cool about it. And, and then we got the movie, and it broke a lot of hearts. It did, but I love that movie to this day. I still love that movie. I watch that movie at least 3 times a year. It's just one of those movies that I'm gonna watch Transformers the movie. I just sit down and just watch it, and the animation is still sharp to this day. And that's what's so awesome about it. And we'll talk more about that. But let's get into this list. You ready to talk a little bit more about Transformers? And I know for a fact you got some Transformers stuff to show off too.
Dude,
So
I'm ready. I got Transformers all over the place. Right, there's some Transformers chilling right behind me, man. I'm ready for this right
all
here,
right.
Izzy.
So we're going to take a look inside Transformers comic books. We got 20 comic books on this list. This is by no way a countdown or a top 10 list or anything like that. Instead, what we're doing a chronological order of Transformers based off of the important, really key importance. So what's really interesting about this list is how affordable many of these books really are. So if you want to build a Transformers comic book collection, you could do it at a very modest price. That's the nice thing. But we got to start with the very first one, and that is Transformers #1. This book came out in 1984 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $3,050 and 9.8. That was in October of 2021. The last sale of this book, surprisingly, was $135 for near mint. That is a steal. The fair market value for a fine is $53. 9.8s are actually going for around $908. There's currently not 7,934 copies in the census. This is the first of a 4-issue limited series. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that term limited series later, but this is the first comic book, U.S. comic book appearance of the Autobots with Optimus Prime, and the first appearance of the Decepticons with their leader, Megatron. Talk to me a little bit about the beginnings.
Oh my goodness. For one, this is one of those must-have Transformer comics for all fans, comic book, or fans of the comics, the toys, the cartoons, and whatnot. I mean, of course, like what you mentioned, this is the introduction to the hero. We're talking about the ultimate hero with Optimus Prime, his nemesis, Megatron. We get to know who these bad guys and good guys are. We talk about, how they come to Earth, how they were fighting all the way from Cybertron to just trying to look for Energon all over. This is one of those it's a slightly much different approach to the original lore that we know of in the cartoons. And this is where you get the two fans kind of like either you split or you get to enjoy into different mediums right here. And having the, #1 here in my hand, I just have to
We got to show that off.
I have to show this. All right. This is the #1 right here. Let me see if I can get some more.
You got a 7.0, and it's a yellow label. So talk to me about this. Yellow means sign.
Yellow means sign, and it's not signed by Sienkiewicz. It's not signed by any of the writers or any of the creators of this comic. This is signed by Frank Welker. This is signed by Peter Cullen, the original voices of Optimus and Megatron. I was actually at the Las Vegas Comic-Con and got to meet my hero. And I will say this, Peter Cullen is my hero because he voiced my hero, and just being able to get this personally done. Like, I actually walked into a con and got this done, and this is my grail. Everyone's chasing their grail. This is my grail. I have it in my possession, and this is my absolute favorite comic in my collection, 100%.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit more about Peter Cullen and Frank Welker and why they're so important to this Transformers lore, because really up to this day, for the most part, they've been still part of the Transformers universe in some fashion or not.
Exactly. So when Peter Cullen was doing the voice for Optimus, he was only signed on, really, if you think about it, he was only signed on to do it for 2 seasons plus the movie until they switched out the toys, right?
Mhm.
And then they moved on, Hasbro moved on with creating more toys and whatnot. Same thing with Frank Welker. He was only signed on. Technically, they've only done the original cartoon for 2 seasons in the movie, and even half the movie, because Frank Welker did Megatron for the first 2 seasons, and then half the movie, and then all of a sudden now we get Galvatron. All right, now we get Hot Rod. We get Rodimus Prime, but the delivery of lines, you felt it. The delivery of their messages, you felt it. And those were the iconic voices of our childhood. They stayed with us. So during the movie, when you see the change in the guards, that's where my 1980s trauma began right there. All right. It was when
many of us too. I'll admit to that one.
Exactly. So hearing the voice every single day after school, and then all of a sudden you don't get to hear it, it messed with us, in the 80s. That's why they had to rush to create the return of Optimus Prime in the
Mhm,
middle of season 3 because Hasbro didn't know how big of
mm,
an impact that was to get rid of Optimus. We
mhm,
don't get to hear Peter Cullen anymore. What's going on? Like it
yeah,
was just one of those things like, whoa, we were just switching out toys. I didn't know it was this big. So that's how iconic they were. They were so
yeah.
iconic that when we lost them, we really lost them, and it hurt all of us.
Yeah, and we're definitely gonna talk a little bit more later about the movies. Um, but one thing I want to do emphasize is the importance of Peter Cullen more so than Frank Welker, because Frank Welker is definitely hugely important. But when it came to the Transformers movie, the live action movie the Michael Bay movie, they went as far as getting Peter Cullen back.
Exactly.
Originally, Frank Welker was going to come back, but for some reason, for them, it didn't work out properly. I think he still voices some characters in the movie. I'm not 100% certain about that. And they ended up getting Hugo Weaving to do the voice of Megatron instead. Uh, why do you think that was so important for them to get that?
They said that Frank Welker's voice wasn't working with what they were trying to do with Megatron at the time to get it synthesized for the movie. They felt like Hugo Weaving would his voice worked slightly better. So that's why they went in the direction with Hugo Weaving. However, there was so much of an uproar about Frank Welker not coming back as Megatron that he eventually did. Yes, he wasn't there for Megatron in the first movie, but he ended up coming back into subsequent movies after that because the fans spoke loud enough.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, I'm not a huge Michael Bay fan. I'll be honest, when it came to the first Transformers movie, I did enjoy it like everybody else did. My confusion was when they started fighting, I had no idea who was fighting who. It was so crashed together, it felt like. But overall, the movie was fun. It was definitely a movie of its time.
Yeah.
The sequels didn't live up to them, with the exception of Bumblebee, which kind of gave us like, oh no, this is Transformers, because we
Yeah.
did get that scene with Cybertron,
Yeah.
which I thought was amazing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that character that we're gonna look at in a minute. But let's move on to our next book, and that's Transformers #3. This book came out in 1984 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $650 and 9.8, and that was in September of 2022. The last known sale was $26 at a no grade. The raws are going for about $18 for a fine. 9.6 are $105. There's currently 1,268 copies in the census as of today. And this is a crossover with Spider-Man. And this was really interesting because not only did Marvel have Transformers in the comic books, but they were the production company for the animated series for the United States, which was a big thing because you had was it Sumbo, right? That I think that was the name of the company, Sumbo, and Marvel Productions. That was part of it. So this is a cool little moment in time where we get a crossover event with Spider-Man and the Transformers. Who doesn't love that?
Exactly. And then there's several crossovers that happened within the Transformers lore over the years, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's one of my favorites because I'm like, look at that, Spider-Man's hanging out with the Transformers, and look at him rapping out Megatron.
And in the black suit too. In the
In the
black
black
suit.
suit,
In
so
the
that's
black
actually
suit. Oh, wait a minute
all
here.
right. Now, I did mention before that this was a limited series. It was a 4-issue limited series. However, Marvel pulled the trigger and made it an ongoing series practically immediately. And the first book from that new ongoing series was Transformers #5 that came out in 1985 for Marvel Comics with a high sale of $303 at a 9.8. That was in July of 2024, so just about a year ago. Last sale was $19 at a no grade. Raws goes for about $11 at a fine, and the 9.8 are going for $171. There's 1,091 copies in the census. This is not the first appearance of Shockwave. He makes his first appearance on issue #4. However, this is the iconic Shockwave cover, which we'll talk more about Megatron and the importance of Megatron, but let's talk a little bit about this guy named Shockwave, because something about him that's very distinct What can you tell me about Shockwave?
Shockwave is the one who is in charge of Cybertron. When Megatron left, Shockwave was in charge of running things on Cybertron. Cybertron was controlled mainly by the Decepticons. Megatron was on his way. He was fighting the Autobots on the Ark. Shockwave stayed there. Shockwave has to be the most dangerous antagonist out there. He is cerebral, he is smart, and he is ruthless. This right here, if you watch the cartoon and you follow any of the comics, it almost seems like Soundwave and Starscream is Megatron's number one. No, Shockwave is Megatron's true number one, and Soundwave knows it, but Soundwave's Megatron's number one on Earth, one of the most ruthless characters out there in the Transformer world.
Mhm. And this cover here, again, this may be considered one of the greatest covers in Transformers. Next to obviously issue number 1 by Sienkiewicz, but I have to say I like this one even better because just look at it. It just says are all dead, and you see Shockwave's arm, which is a cannon, really, and you see that smoke coming out of it. That to me is like, oh, I'm a badass, and I'm responsible for the dead characters that you see here.
Quite cerebral. He knew what he was doing. This is one of those great covers that just shows you that something just happened, and Shockwave is walking right across the cover nonchalantly, like who's next?
Exactly. Let's go over our next book here. And our next book is Transformers number 8. This book came out in 1985 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is $468.09.8. That was in March of 2022. Last sale of this book is $29 at a fine. And the Raws goes for about $22 at a very fine. 9.8s go for $228. There's currently 1,349 copies in the census. This is the first appearance in comic books of the Dinobots. Me, Grimlock. I've always loved the Dinobots. Some people don't like them. They think they're little too cartoony. But me personally, I'm a big fan of the Dinobots. How do you feel about the Dinobots?
So when the Dinobots was introduced in the cartoons, I was like, oh, cool, dinosaurs. Oh, they're kind of dumb. I get it. Their brains aren't developed. Okay, I see what you're trying to do with this. But their enemy was Devastator. You had the 6 Constructicons. It was the Decepticons, Constructicons versus the Autobots, Dinobots. And I'm like, oh, cool. I remember watching the cartoon say, oh, cool. The Constructicons, they merged into Devastator. What are we going to see out of the Dinobots? Nothing, but they are brutally strong. And that was the good thing about them, is that they were strong enough separately to take on one huge robot with Devastator. And that was the cool thing about the Dinobots.
Yeah. Slag. Which one's Slag? Remind me which one's Slag. Slag and Sludge.
I want to say Slag is the Triceratop and Sludge is the Stegosaurus.
Okay, I think it's Sludge. So if you watch the Transformers movie, I don't know if you've ever caught it. There's a scene in the movie where yeah, exactly. There's a scene in the movie where it goes out of whack, right? So it's when you watch a Transformers movie, it's very realistic in style and tone. Yeah. But there's this one moment where it's Devastator. We'll talk a little bit more about Devastator. He slams Slug, and his eyes pop up. Yeah. It goes right in. It is one of those blink and you miss it moments. But every time I see the movie, I always have to pause and watch that in slow motion just to see what the animators were doing with this scene. And it's to me, it's just like, here's something for you guys, just to have a little laugh, and stuff like that. Just see his eyes just pop right out of his sockets. It's awesome. But I'm with you. I'm a big fan of the Dinobots. How did you feel about the live action version of Grimlock? Even though the movie was bad, which I think was The Last Night, did you think they got Grimlock right as far as his look and feel? Because they made him massive in that movie.
Can we talk about something else? No, just kidding. I was not a fan. I was not a fan of how they handled the Dinobots in the Bayverse. I'll be honest with you and tell you, I'm not a big Bayformer universe fan.
I'm with you.
However, I agree. What I do enjoy, what I do like, that the Bayformers what they did was they actually brought a new generation of Transformers fans who want to know more, like who is Grimlock, who is Slag, who is Snarl, Sludge, and all of them. And it brought in the curiosity of kids to want to collect Transformers again in a different way. Also brought out a lot of adult fans who discovered third-party Transformer figures through the movies. They're like, well, hold on, let me take a look and see what's going on. And I'm finding out through Transformer communities out on Facebook that a lot of the Transformer fans that are now collecting third-party Transformer actually got their start by watching the Bayformers movies. So the one thing I do appreciate about Michael Bay, what he did was reignite the passion and the love for Transformers so that other people can start collecting them.
Yeah, and it was definitely cinematic. I'll give it that much. It was cinematic. That first movie was, again, it wasn't my favorite take on the Transformers. I'm more of a purist with a lot of it. But what I liked about it was that we got to see the Transformers in some capacity, right? And as we got more and more silly throughout the sequels, which they just kept getting worse, there were just those moments. Like Last Night is such a bad movie, but I will admit that scene with Grimlock and Optimus on top of him with the sword. That by itself, that's worth watching by itself. That you know what I mean? Just seeing how massive they made them.
But just that scene, you guys. Just
no, I agree. Just that scene. The rest of the movie is terrible. Or watching anything of Anthony Hopkins just being like, why am I here again?
And, right. That is the like, you don't look like you think you belong in this movie, bro. And it was quite obvious.
You have a Oscar caliber Julia Arts actor in possibly the worst movie of the year.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
So it's a part of time. All right, let's talk a little bit about that next character we mentioned before. And that's in Transformers number 10 that came out in 1985 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book was $1,000 and 9.8. That was in June of 2021. The last sale of this book was $15 at a no grade. Ross goes for about $9 at a fine, while the graded copies go for $190 at 9.8. There's currently 514 copies in the census. You mentioned the Constructicons, and they've merged to form Devastator. Also, we have the first cameo, Jetfire. We're going to talk about Jetfire in the next issue that we'll look at. But talk to me about how important the Constructicons are, because they're kind of the blend of Transformers meets Voltron. And explain that.
I totally understand, and I totally see what you're talking about there. When Voltron was first introduced to us, you get to see 5 separate components merge into one big robot. And that was, again, going back to how I started watching Japanese animation and loving the robots. To see Transformers actually do that right there, being able to bring out 5, or actually in this case, 6 different components, and they merge for the kill. You get Devastator, the biggest robot of the time, going up against the Autobots. This is one of those things where Megatron needed to get the upper hand, and he figure out a way to do it. Because in the cartoon, the Constructicons weren't made on Cybertron. They were actually made on Earth. They were made here. And so they're kind of like one of the first, they're like me, the first generation born here in the Americas, But
so you're trying to say that the Decepticons on the immigrants or something?
We're not going to get political on this show.
Yeah, let's not go there.
But it was important because it was the Decepticons needing that upper hand, and their way of getting the upper hand was, hey, you know what? We are going to make a bigger robot by doing this. They did, they accomplished, and that was what was presented to us with Devastator, one of the coolest ideas ever, in my opinion.
Now, if I recall, Devastator's colors weren't green and purple, like as we see it here. Isn't it yellow and purple?
It was more like yellow and like an indigo. So back when they created the Diaclones, which was actually the original toys that was made by Takara Tomy back in Japan, it was literally, they didn't have a story to them. They didn't create a story behind any of the robots. The Diaclones were literally just vehicles that transform. No story, no bad guy, no good guy. So in Japan, they did release the Constructicons as a more like a yellow orangish with a indigo hint to them, and they did merge into Devastator the same way as the Constructicons did here in America with the green color. But the only difference again is that they didn't have a story there in Japan. Here in America, we gave them a story.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to our next book, because we talk about the cameo of Jetfire. Jetfire is a huge character in Transformers lore, and we have his very first appearance, his first full appearance and cover in Transformers issue 11. This book came out in 1985 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $250, 9.8. Last sale of this book was $7 near mint. The fair market value of this book is $9 at a very fine, and $162 at 9.8. There's currently 344 copies in the census. As I mentioned, this is the first full appearance of Jetfire, a Decepticon who later becomes an Autobot. Let's talk about this. Can they switch sides?
I mean, they can do whatever they want, right? I mean, but I didn't read the comic books, but in the cartoons, yes. So Jetfire was already on Earth. They discovered Jetfire in ice. Starscream realized, hey, I know this guy. This is my dude. So when Jetfire came out of the ice, the Decepticons were like, hey, you're a big guy, because comparatively speaking, Jetfire was big. He was a big, muscular dude. And then on Cybertron, Starscream and Jetfire were best of friends as scientists. They were scientists creating things, figuring things out together. It was great. So when Starscream said, I need you to join me, Jetfire's like, you're my friend. I will join you to the depths. I got you. Until he realized what was going on and that they were fighting for the wrong side. That's when Jetfire, and I'm not going to say he turned, Izzy. He was always a good guy. He just labeled himself a Decepticon to join his friend until he found out that his friend's kind of a jerk. And then he switched sides, but he was always a good guy.
And they did touch on this kind of subject in the movies at one time, whereas you could switch sides. I do remember in one of the Michael Bay movies, I think it was The Dark of the Moon, I think it was, or Dark Side of the Moon. I don't know. It was a Pink Floyd movie, Pink Floyd song. But originally speaking, when you think of Autobots, I always looked at it from the perspective of automobiles, right? So having a jet be part of the Autobots kind of switched it up a little bit, made it a little different, and at the same time, I think it worked out. One of the things I do love about the Decepticons is that the Deceptive is in their name, as per John Cena. but it is something that makes this storytelling more than just good guys versus bad guys. Now we're going further into lore, further into storytelling, because I have to say that the people that were watching, the kids that were watching Transformers, they were probably watching it with some parents or some dads and things like that. And they wanted the stories to be more than just one-dimensional stories. And I think Jetfire was one of those characters that made it more than just one-dimensional, even with characters like the dynamics between Megatron and Starscream, which you didn't really see that prior to Transformers, where Megatron, all he does is insult Starscream, and Starscream, all he does is wants to take over and kill Megatron, but he's too much of a wuss to do anything about it. You know what I mean? And that was what I think that's what made Transformers so special. The fact that it wasn't one dimensional. It was very much storytelling, and they had the folks at Marvel Comics helping them in the writing of that story as well. So Jetfire is one of those characters that really expanded the lore a lot more than just good guys versus bad guys in robot form.
It flipped it, definitely. And then the toy. Do you remember the toy itself? You see Jetfire in the cartoon. You're like, this guy's got a cool design. Can't wait for his toy to come out. When his toy comes out, you're like, wait a minute. This looks familiar but different. He does not look like Jetfire. What's going on? Then you realize that all they did was reuse the mold for the Macross Robotech VF1s, the Valkyries, and they just relabeled it as Jetfire, which was such an uproar. However, as years have gone on, and I mentioned third-party figures, now there is an actual jet fire that's cartoon accurate and transforms into a cartoon accurate jet, and that is some of the most sought after toys in the third-party market as well.
Well, that's good to know. Okay. All right, we talked a little bit about it. Now it's time to talk a lot about it. Let's talk about Transformers, the movie #1. This one came out in 1986 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book was $525,009.8. That was in May of 2022. The last sale of this book was $80,009.6. The fair market value for the raws are $18 at very fine, while the gradeds are $191.99.8. 546 copies in the census. This is the first appearance in comics of Ultra Magnus and RC, Galvatron, Unicron in planet mode. He doesn't become Unicron until issue #3, and first appearance of Astral Train. But this is also the death of Optimus Prime. Let's take a moment and talk about Transformers, the movie, which I believe is the greatest Transformers movie.
How many moments do we have, Izzy? Because there's a lot of moments we could talk about here.
You got the touch.
You got the power. Yes, greatest soundtrack of the 80s, hands down. Some of the greatest animation for an American cartoon, hands down. Introduction of a bad guy that is not a Decepticon. Phenomenal. This is one of those things, again, it changes a lot within the Transformer lore in the sense that it introduces new characters. You get to see the second in command with Ultra Magnus. You get to see the unfortunate death of Optimus Prime, which, again, like I asked earlier, Izzy, when did your 80s trauma begin? For me, it was this right here.
It was a moment. It was definitely a moment, especially when you watch it and you have that hospital scene and he's there, and then you could feel the tense. It's a very intense moment because you could hear it in the music that they're playing in the background, because not even the soundtrack is amazing. And I am with you. It's one of the greatest 80s soundtrack. I'll listen to that thing any time of day, but it's the score that's also equally as good. Right.
And you just mood.
You get that part where how can you show empathy for a robot, and how can you show emotion in a robot? All you have to do is turn him gray and have his head turn. Because that one moment he's there, he's like, and then you're bawling out. You're straight up bawling out.
I remember the kids in the movie theater. Wait a minute. No, mom. No, he's not dead. Wait. And the cries in the movie theaters. It was insane.
Let's not forget, within the first 10 minutes of the movie, they straight up kill all of them. Like, the only one that survived really was Bumblebee. Right? One or two did, but let's be honest, they got genocide.
Yeah. And it does explain that they were more powerful. They gathered all of their energon to be able to one blast everyone. Brawn they took out, Prowl they took out, they took out Ironhide and Ratchet, important characters to the Autobots, and you're like, what is going on here? Where did your 80s trauma begin? It was
instruments of destruction, man. That was
exactly.
And with that soundtrack in play, right? You got this instrument of destruction, and you just dead. They were, and to be honest, they killed more Autobots in that movie than they did with the Decepticons. Even though we did get some Decepticon deaths, like the Insecticons, they got smashed.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening with a lot of those characters, as the movie progresses, they end up going to Galvatron, and then they become these new versions of themselves. Let me see if I can remember. The Sweeps was one of them, and what was the name of the other one? Cyclonus,
yeah.
Which I thought was
the Sweeps was.
Yeah, I love Cyclonus, man. Yeah. I love Cyclonus. He's cool looking. And then we get Galvatron, who really is Megatron, but voiced by the one and only Leonard Nimoy. Spock is playing Galvatron in this movie. And let's not forget, Orson Welles' final performance in a movie is Unicron. and from what I remember, he passed away just shortly after the recording.
Yeah.
And it is such a perfect voice for a character.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm here forged dismemberment. Like, it was a perfect execution with Orson Welles, how he delivered all of Unicron's lines. He is what that's really one of the reasons why I enjoyed looking at Unicron. This is one of the reasons why I enjoyed Unicron's character. Wasn't just that he was a planet-sized Transformers that had zero allegiance, but he was voiced by an iconic actor in Orson Welles, and it was perfectly delivered. And unfortunately, yeah, he passed away shortly after that. The funny thing is, that little piece of trivia right there actually won me a big, large popcorn and a soda at a movie theater once. Or like, they even asked, "Oh, who voiced Unicron?" And it was his final acting, and I was the only one in the whole movie theater. I stood up, punk ass kids in front of me. This guy thinks he knows. I'm like, Orson Welles. I do know. Thank you very much. Yeah.
and let's go into the actual Transformers, the Autobots that are placed here. I have a soft spot for Hot Rod. I love me some Hot Rod, and he eventually becomes Rodimus Prime. I remember how he was not well loved by a lot of the fans. Most of the fans that, as we mentioned before, they wanted Optimus Prime. They wanted it Optimus. And I'm like, but I like Hot Rod because he's flawed. And it's, again, it brings back to that three-dimensional character, but it was very much, he was very divisive as far as how people felt about him.
Mm-hmm.
I personally always loved him. I love Hot Rod. I love, Rodimus Prime. I love Ultra Magnus. And I think Ultra Magnus, Robert Stack, another one, right? The Untouchables right there. Wait.
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Oh,
we're looking at this is an Ultra Magnus. This is a Legends class Ultra Magnus. This guy stands at about 5.5 inches tall, but he transforms right into the trailer. But this is almost cartoon accurate. This is one of those third-party toys that I was telling you about right here. And yeah, Ultra Magnus was dope. I really liked Ultra Magnus. He knew where he stood in the line of leadership. He knew that he wasn't good enough to be a leader, but he was good enough to be a commander. He was noble. I liked Ultra Magnus, and I'm with you in the sense that I did like Hot Rod. I liked Hot Rod. He was fun. He was good for the younger group. He was what they used to bring into, okay, here's the new generation of toys. This is what we're going to present to you. As Rodimus, though, that's what I did not like. Because I wanted Optimus. I was thinking Optimus.
There you go. So moving on to our next book here, we're gonna stick to the story of Optimus because in Transformers number 24, 1987, Marvel Comics, which has a high sale of $1,150 at a 9.8 in April of 2024, also has a last sale of $10 at a fine, which is also the fair market value for a fine. 9.4 is the average, and that goes for around $80. There's currently 136 copies in the census. This is a retelling of the death of Optimus Prime. Now, we're going to take this moment here to talk a little bit more about the death of Optimus Prime and really what it caused, right? Because there was a cause and effect to it. As we were talking about earlier, the purpose of the Transformers movie, which the underlining purpose of the movie was to give a new toy line. That was the purpose. It was to create a new toy line for kids to do it. So what they ended up doing was they killed off the majority of the old generation of Transformers, or the first season of Transformers. We'll talk about Generation 1, Generation 2, I'm sure. And then they killed off some of the Decepticons or have them turn into these other versions of the Decepticons. The death of Optimus Prime led to a chain of events that included G.I. Joe. Now, why am I bringing this up? We'll bring this up in a minute when it comes to G.I. Joe, because when Optimus Prime died, kids lost it. Like, there were literally kids crying in the movie theaters. There were parents sending out letters because people send out letters, when on social media.
Or they mailed it. They mailed it.
They used a stamp with a stamp.
Stamp. And
handwritten. Right,
strongly worded letter to those guys.
It was such a big deal that there were plans to make a GI Joe the movie, which they did do, and that kind of like went direct to streaming or went direct to video, then eventually to TV. It never made it to the movie theaters because, as crazy as it may sound, it's a cult classic today, and most people that love Transformers absolutely love the movie. But it wasn't really a box office success in that way. It didn't really rack up that much money in the movie theaters. But what it did cause was, because of those letters, G.I. Joe, the movie, had to change their ending because they were gonna kill off Duke.
Yes.
They were gonna kill off Duke in the cartoon. Instead, they just gave him a coma.
Yes. But if you watch that movie, you saw Serpentor throw his cobra directly at Duke. Where did it hit? It hit him right in his heart. How do you survive that and just get into a coma? But it's because of what happened to Optimus Prime.
Exactly. So that's why it's such a big deal. And that's because Hasbro owns the rights to both G.I. Joe and the Transformers. And that leads us to our very next book, and that is G.I. Joe and Transformers #1. This book came out in 1987 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $550 at 9.8. That was in October of 2023. Last sale of this book was $10 at a no grade. The raws are going for about $12. The graded goes for about $94 at 9.6. There's 732 copies in the census. This is the first crossover event in the comic books. We have yet to really see a crossover event outside of the comic books, but it was teased in the last Transformers movie, Rise of the Beast. I'm looking forward to it, but there's something interesting about that cover to me.
Why do they have to do that to Bumblebee?
Justice for Bumblebee.
Justice for Bumblebee. So why do you do that to Bumblebee? And of course, these are all drawn. They're hand drawn. You're going to show something terrible is going to happen. But all you got to do is redraw them again. But as a kid, you don't get that. You don't see that. Oh, this is just make believe. No, what happened to Bumblebee? He dies. He dies in this one, but we end up getting Goldbug eventually. But we'll talk.
Yeah, we get Goldbug. But this one's one of those books to me that this was the first time we get this crossover event, and I cannot think of another place that there was a crossover event outside of comic books. It hasn't happened, not in animated form, not in live action form. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's because it's too big. There are too many characters in both G.I. Joe and in Transformers in order to bring out a live action crossover like this. So there's balances that you need to bring. You can only bring in certain amount of G.I. Joes and only certain Transformers. So there's a balance issue with doing a huge crossover between two of Hasbro's largest properties. And I think it was handled fairly well here in the crossover comic book.
Well, even in an animated format, because we haven't seen this in animated format either.
Same thing. There's just too many characters to bring out. I mean, you're going to have two leaders with Duke and Optimus. You're going to have three leaders, actually four if you think about it. With the Decepticons, you have Megatron, you have Shockwave, you have Soundwave, and then with the Cobra, you have Cobra Commander. And you kind of have Destro, really, who's really like the brains behind. And then you have Serpentor, right, who comes in, and then you have Globulus, who is like the leader of Cobra Law, which there's just too many moving parts, and I think that's why we haven't seen that just yet, because they don't know how to balance it out.
Yeah, I think with G.I. Joe, like, I've always been more of a Transformers fan than I was a G.I. Joe fan. I did enjoy G.I. Joe. I don't remember much of it besides certain episodes here and then, of course, the G.I. Joe movie. I can't wait till the day comes that we finally do get to see it. Unfortunately, they just have not done G.I. Joe right in live action. The first movie I saw, and I wanted to walk out of the theaters, but I couldn't because I had family with me. And then I made the mistake of seeing the second movie and feeling exactly the same way.
Hold on. You saw that second movie. What was the best part of that second movie, though?
They killed Duke immediately.
There you go.
That was definitely an Easter egg right there.
It's so funny how we're like, oh gosh, I can't stand this actor right now, blah, 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 blah. But he comes back as, Gambit in Deadpool. You're like, oh, I'm all about you now. I love you.
Well,
I
to
just
be
he was
honest,
a
Channing
poor
Tatum's
choice
not.
for
Let's be honest, Channing Tatum's not a great actor in
no.
general. Like as far
Yeah.
as acting chops, he's a baby face. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
He's one of those types. And it wasn't until like 21 Jump Street that they finally found what makes Channing Tatum great. And then
He's actually
eventually
funny.
Magic Mike, but I've never seen Magic Mike, but you
Don't
can
lie.
ask the
Don't
ladies.
lie.
No, I really
Don't
haven't.
lie.
I really
Don't lie. Don't.
honestly I haven't.
I'm not gonna lie. I've seen both of the Magic Mikes, dude, and they are entertaining beyond the male
I've
stripperism.
never seen it. I'll be honest.
They're genuinely fun. I'm shocked to even say that, but they are genuinely fun. And Channing Tatum's actually pretty cool in those movies, you know.
Yeah, so
But yeah, Channing Tatum playing Duke was a definite miscast for that character. He should not have been that character. And yeah, they treated the movies quite terribly. Even like they even tried to get us sucked back in by, hey, we're gonna release a Snake Eye Storm Shadow movie. And how do you mess that one up? How? Oh. The
Well,
lore is there. How do you mess that one up? And they completely messed it up. So, yes, I'm a little on the fence about a G.I. Joe Transformer crossover movie, which they did hint at the end of Rise of the Beast. But Rise of the Beast was good.
it was.
I'm going to go as far as to even say that it's probably the better of all of those Transformer movies. I would say Rise of the Beast, Bumblebee, Transformers 1, and we don't talk about the rest.
Yeah. No, to me, Bumblebee's the best live action.
And people can be wrong and it's okay, but I get it, Izzy. Don't worry.
Well, you
Just
have
kidding, just
you
kidding.
have to call it as it is. It is the greatest depiction of what Cybertron should look like live action, which
But
they
that's
weren't able to do beforehand.
yeah, but that's the only thing about the Bumblebee movies that they gave us a hint of what the War of Cybertron movie should be like. And they're talking already about how Transformers 1 is not going to get a sequel. And that makes me
That's a
sad.
shame.
But if Transformers 1 doesn't get a sequel, I think it's okay because it should lead fairly well into G1 and even some of the other iterations, Robots in Disguise, Prime, all the other iterations of Transformers that have happened over the years, mostly into G1. However, it does not eliminate and I will have to say, like the Bay universe
Mhm.
with a all CGI War for Cybertron movie, because we did get that in the Bumblebee movie, which if I get that right there, I would be extremely happy.
Mhm. Yeah,
And it doesn't
it'll be
have to
very
be,
expensive.
yeah, but it doesn't have to be. I don't know. I think it could be cheaper than a live action if it's all CGI, because CGI is actually a lot cheaper to do than.
If it's CGI animated, it's cheap.
Yeah.
If it's CGI live action, it's more expensive.
How can it be CGI? Oh, I see what you're saying. If
Right?
it's
It's the
if it,
lighting
yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah. If they keep it as the War for Cybertron from Bumblebee moving forward for that aspect of it all, eliminating all things human, I think that would be the next best thing that they can do. They give us a kid version with Transformers 1, which kind of gave us a little bit of adult themes in that one too. And it was phenomenal. And there's no reason for a Transformer 2 because we already got G1. Leave it alone. Give me War for Cybertron.
There you have it.
Now.
All right. So now let's go to another side of the toys and the cartoons that kind of it was part of a big deal, and that is the Headmasters. Transformers the Headmaster #1, 1987 Marvel Comics, high sale $200 and 9.8. That was in February of 2024. Last sale of this book was $7 at a no grade. The Raws are going for about $5 cover price, really for a fine $62 for 9.6. There's currently 196 copies in the census. This is the first team appearance of the Headmaster Autobots, led by Fortress Maximus, and the first team appearance of the Headmaster Decepticons, led by Scorbonox, and the first team appearance of the Monster Bots and the Technobots, and the first team appearance of the Nebulons. I remember the Headmasters cartoons as being one of the last cartoons in the Marvel productions of the Transformers animated series. It was roughly around this time, because if I remember it quite well, Hot Rod becomes a headmaster, and I think RC becomes one as well. And it kind of led to that. I think, if I remember, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if I remember the episode well enough. There was a plague, and the plague kind of like corrupted everybody. The Decepticons, Autobots, including Optimus. And I think the headmasters were the ones that kind of like fought against it or something like that. Which kind of led to an end of the series or something like that, if I remember it well. Or I could be mixing it up with something else. But you tell me a little bit more about the headmasters and their importance in the Transformers lore.
It was getting a little stale from reading about what went on with the season 4 of Transformers, because season 4 of Transformers is only a few episodes long, which focus a lot on the headmasters. So it was very much getting stale. No one was buying the toys anymore. Hasbro's about to end this show. Let's just do something crazy and wild. So they went ahead and threw in the Nebulans, who actually put on a suit that lets them transform into the head versions of their headmaster, partner, because they weren't controlled or controlling, they were partners. So they would help out both the Autobots and the Decepticons. So this was like Hasbro's last, let's just do something crazy and throw it out there. So in America, season 4 ended and it was quite abrupt. They gave us the headmasters. It was a cool little introduction. That was it. However, in Japan actually took the headmaster idea, brought it back home, and they're like, all right, America, we'll go ahead and take it from here. And then they created their version of Generation 2 with the headmasters, with Victory Saber, God Force, and all of that right there afterwards. So headmasters continued on in comics, and then it did continue on in Japan, but it kind of died in America.
Interesting. Yeah, because like I said, I remember the headmasters, and I thought that was cool, but then I didn't see anything afterwards.
Yeah.
Kind of like it happened, it came, and that was it. And they did close it out. I will give it that much. They did close out Transformers, the animated series. They closed it out in a way that the Decepticons and the Autobots, they kind of kissed and made up pretty much. And that's how it ended, where Megatron, I think he was Megatron again. Was he Megatron again? Or was he Galvatron?
It's very fuzzy, but I thought he was Galvatron, but I could be mistaken after like towards the end of season 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I know they got the plague. That turned them red. I remember that much. They all became red, like their whole bodies turned red. Like everybody got the plague. It was a straight up Walking Dead, but meets Transformers.
But then there was the white Optimus,
and then there you go. Wait, I gotta go back. We gotta go back. Let's take a look at white.
There was the white Optimus Prime. They sprayed him with that special metal. I remember. And he wouldn't be able to be infected by the red. So.
Yeah, now it sounds kind of racist. Now I'm thinking about it.
White's the savior.
Why didn't they put black?
Colored is bad. Wait a minute here. What are you trying to tell us here, Hasbro?
I don't know about that one. But it was interesting because I do remember it as they all kissed and made up, and now everybody's friends again. And then that was it. That was kind of like the end of the Transformers. We don't see them, but what was really cool is that the comic books did keep going, and we have Transformers 61. This one came out in 1989 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $500 and 9.8. That was in March of 2023. Last sale of this book was $138 and 9.8. The raws it goes for about $15. Very good. While the graded copies are $138 and 9.8. $140. I always say these things. They always get caught. 140 copies in the census. This is an introduction again of Unicron, but more importantly, this talks a little bit about Primus. We're not talking about Primus, the rock band with Les Claypool, which, Jerry
was a race car driver.
Yeah, exactly.
2 years old.
Primus, the creator of the Transformers. And this gives us the origin of the Transformers and Cybertron. I felt the need to talk a little bit more about this one because of that function. Talk to me a little bit about Primus.
Are we talking about Unicron's brother Primus?
Oh, wait, we got to show this guy.
Are we
Look at
talking
that.
about Unicron? Look, this is Primus's brother Unicron, who is so affectionately drawn by our host IzzyVerse right here. This is one of those things that he did. If you're looking for something right there, $60 over to Izzy. Primus is Cybertron.
Mhm.
If Unicron transforms into a planet, that's still Unicron, but Primus, in his silent sleep mode, he is the planet of Cybertron. And in Transformer cartoon lore, the Quintessons actually created the Transformers, right? They physically created the Transformers, as the Autobots are more of the worker bees, while the Decepticons are more of the militants, yada, yada, yada. But as time goes on, they awaken Primus, and Primus is kind of like their deity, right? He's their deity, and he was the one that actually gave all the Transformers the power to transform. So in essence, he gave them their soul,
Their spark.
their spark, right? And that's who Primus is. And in cartoon lore, I want to say in Cybertron, Transformer Cybertron, you actually get to see a battle between Unicron and Primus in their robot mode. So it's really important that we get to hear exactly where the Transformers did come from, because it's a lot deeper than just here's a good guy, here's a bad guy, here's the worker bee, here's the militants. It gets deeper with Primus giving all the Transformers their spark, and all of them, not just Autobots, but all of them.
Interesting. I didn't know that much about that. That was part of the lore that I'm not familiar with, but I like the fact that the comic books kind of touch upon the subject matter, because again, at this point, the comic books are like, we're doing whatever we want because we don't have to worry about anything. We could create as we go. Larry Hama is a big part of that. He also a big part of G.I. Joe as well. Now we're going to move on because Marvel Comics canceled Transformers, but few years later, they brought it back with what we call Transformers Generation 2. Number one, that came out back in 1993 for Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is $180 and 9.8. That was in just recently, and that was the last sale. That is also the average. The raws are going for about $8 at a very fine. There's currently 444 copies in the census. This actually features the first appearance of G-Axis. I don't know anything about no G-Axis, but what I really want to hear about is what's the difference between Generation 1, Generation 2, and if there is any other generations that come along with that.
See, in the comic books, it was almost like a refresh. It was almost like, let's start again,
Yeah.
trying to keep as much of the lore as possible. So in the comic books, it still kind of touched on Generation 1, but with new stories, with new Transformers, with, adding to the lore without trying to take away too much from it. However, the Generation 2 comic book, I do know it still kind of stands on its own, where you can read it and not have any ties to G1, but there is ties to G1 somewhat in this. However, in the cartoons, there is Generation 2 Transformer cartoons in Japan, which we kind of talked about earlier, where it was God Force, it was Victory, and it was basically like and Headmasters. So like there was like a trilogy of Transformer Japanese cartoons, which also is considered Generation 2. So this is a time when things split. This is where we all see the fans who try to really stay in touch with the cartoons do their best to go to, we couldn't download anything back in 1993. So they would try to find it like in someone's, trunk, and that was recorded on the VHS.
The
and
bootlegs,
whatnot.
pretty much, or something like
Straight
that.
up bootlegs, yeah. But this is where everything just kind of said, all right, we're going here, we're going to go there, and everyone does their own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because here in the States, Transformers were long gone. It was over, pretty much. We moved on. We're no longer involved in Transformers for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big hiatus for Transformers. However, everybody, especially our generation, we still wanted Transformers. So Marvel Comics did provide us that with this comic, even though this comic in itself was not successful. I don't know how long the run was exactly, but I can tell you right now, people didn't buy it.
Yeah.
People didn't buy this book. Clearly, you can see by the cover that's a very strange looking Optimus. Mm-hmm. Like it's Optimus, but there's something off.
Yeah.
In the cover. And again, going back, it's like when we think about G1, we think the way we look at it in many American perspective, the Western civilization, we look at G1 very differently in the sense of G1 is everything before the movie. G2 is everything after the movie, and that's kind of like the split for us. The casual Transformers fan looks at it that way, but based on what you're saying, that's not the case. All that's part of G1, including Rodimus moving forward, Galvatron, all that's part of G1. Where to the casual Transformers fan, that's not. We look at that being the split.
Yeah, and understandably, because you do get a brand new generation of toys with Rodimus, Hot Rod, Galvatron, Cyclonus, all of those brand new bots and whatnot. So it's understandable that you can take that as G2 or Generation 2. But all of that, season 1 through 4, including the movies, that will always be Generation 1 Transform because of things like what happened in the Marvel comic books. They continued the lore because of what they did in Japan with continuing on with Headmasters, Target Masters, God Force, and Victory. There was another generation of Transformers there. And then you see as time goes on, we get different iterations of moving forward past the original cartoon, which Generation 2 comic books right here, they do tend to, like I mentioned earlier, they won't lean hard on G1 as they're trying to develop something new, but there was a reason for Marvel continuing on with this because they were in works of trying to release more cartoons because they saw the popularity was still there. They just needed to release something in print to keep the name, to keep it on their side. That's why Marvel continued on with the comic books, so that way Hasbro doesn't take that away from them.
Yeah, licensing agreements and things
Exactly.
like that. All right, now we've gone to the point where Marvel no longer has the license to the Transformers. There is a hiatus. This is quite a long gap between now and then, and that was almost 10 years later in Transformers Armada #1. This book came out in 2002 for Dreamwave Productions. No longer Marvel Comics are producing Transformer comic books, but there was significant hype behind this series specifically. This book came out at a high sale of $60, 9.8. That was in October of 2023, so very, very affordable. That was the last sale of this book was $50 at a 9.8, which is also the fair market value for a grade A. This book is going for $3 cover price. There's 113 comics in the census. This is the return of Transformers to the States by way of a company known as Dreamwave, which later will, I think, be renamed to Devil's Due Production. But the artwork here was sharp. A lot of the art was done by Alvin Lee. It was very manga influenced in the sense of manga tech when it comes to that stuff like Gundam and things like that. And I remember picking these books up, and they were white hot when they came out back in 2001. But talk to me more so about what is Armada, because again, we see these books, we say, oh, Transformers is back, and we're excited, but we don't know anything about this Armada thing, which you could explain a little bit more about.
Yes, definitely. So Armada was a cartoon that was released around 2003, actually. In 2002, there was a cartoon called Robots in Disguise, and that was a 52-episode, one-season cartoon that actually kind of led into Armada, which Armada is the introduction of the Minicons. And in this is a whole new lore. This is a whole new way of thinking. This is a whole new Transformers for a new generation. Forget G1, forget Beast Wars, forget Beast Machines, G2. This is something brand new. And Armada was actually part of something called the Unicron Trilogy. The Unicron Trilogy cartoons consisted of Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. And all three of those seasons were slightly different in storytelling, but they were all tied together. Armada was the first one in that trilogy. So that coincides with the comic book that we're seeing right here.
Awesome. Yeah, because Armada, like I said, we didn't know much about it. We just saw it as, hey, Transformers are back. And I think for the most part, everybody was like, well, they're very different, but I'm here for it.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of that. So there was a level of acceptance that came along with it.
Yes.
Now, as time progressed, you could see the price of the book didn't really go much anywhere. But it's some of the best artwork you've seen in comics. I will
Because
say that much.
yeah, because it's piggybacking off of the late 90s not manga, but Japanese animation movies that were coming out. Evangelion. This new generation of cartoon was heavily influenced by some of the more successful 90s Japanese animation movies. Like Evangelion was a phenomenal series right there. Pat Labor. So a lot of the robot type series and movies that came out from Japan, they were coming over to the United States. We were getting them here, and we wanted more of that style. We wanted that Gundam style. We wanted that Macross style. And that's what happened and led into the cartoons, starting with Robots in Disguise. They all hired a Korean-based animation company to draw up new designs for all the robots, and that's what they did. Moving forward, that's why they gave us more of an Asian robotic style with these, which again bled into the comic book.
Awesome. That's great. Well, here's another thing that Dreamwave was able to produce for us that, excuse me, that mostly everybody was super stoked to hear more about. And that was the origin of Optimus Prime with Transformers, rewind. With Transformers, The War Within #1. This book came out in 2002 for Dreamwave Productions. The high sale of this book is $75 and 9.6. That was in October of 2023. Last sale of this book was $3. It's also the fair market value of the book in raw. $24 is for 9.4 on average. It's not that many copies in the census. There's only 45 copies. But this is the origin of Ryan Pax, who will be better known as Optimus Prime. We get to see this recently in the Transformers 1 movie that came out about a year ago now. It's almost been about a year. Talk to me a little bit about Orion Pax and his best friend, I'll say.
So what we got in Transformers 1 is almost exactly what happens in Transformers The War Within. You get the origin of Orion Pax. You get the origin of his best friend Megatron in Transformers 1, but that's kind of like what you get out of it. So if you've seen Transformers 1, Transformers The War Within is going to dive deeper into that lore, into that storyline, because you get who Orion Pax is in G1. We get an image of what Optimus was before he turned into Optimus. In the old G1 cartoon, you see him hanging out with the Leader 1 in the G1, but then this one right here really dives deep into who Orion Pax is, and it also gives us the footprint for what Transformers 1 is going to be.
Yeah, that movie is so good. Like, it is one of those movies that if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Because I think what ended up happening is the marketing behind that movie was geared towards more of a child, right? Where it really wasn't supposed to be. And then it just didn't do it justice. So if you guys ever get a chance to watch Transformers 1, trust me, I will put it right next to Transformers the movie. Right next to it, because those two movies together, if you watch them together, they're amazing. You get to see, 2D animation in Transformers the movie, and then 3D animation in Transformers 1, which does a great job. It tells a nice little origin stories of different characters. Steve Buscemi as Starscream is great because it's like, you know what? It's like you think of Steve Buscemi, he's like a comical actor, but then you think of his voice with Starscream, and you got to say to yourself, yeah, I can see that. It works. You know what I mean? And then this guy turning into Megatron, and for the right reasons too. That's what's the other thing that's important about that movie is like we get a character that eventually becomes the leader of the Decepticons, who's just by his actions, really.
And talking about other characters in Transformers 1, I mean, you get Keegan-Michael Key, who plays BB, right? He
Who
plays
eventually will
Bumblebee.
become Bumblebee.
Bumblebee, right? But in the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to spoil something which I'm hoping gets you to watch it. If you've seen that TV show Key and Peele, where Keegan-Michael Key is a substitute teacher and expects everyone to pronounce their name correctly, one of the kids, of course, is the famous one was Aaron, right? It's not Aaron, It's Aaron. Well, Keegan Michael Key plays BB, and in his little world, he makes all these little robots. One of those little robots' name was Atron, which
Oh, look
was
at
a
that.
nice nod to, hey, I know what that means. Like, I see what you did there, writers. So when you go back, if you're going to go back and watch it there, Izzy, look for the scene when they first meet BB and he introduces all of his robots.
Mhm.
One of his robots is Atron as a
That's
nod
great.
to Aaron. It's
That
so
is
funny.
absolutely
When
awesome.
I saw that, I was dying here at home. I was like, I'm not going to watch this in the movie theater. And that's something I regret.
Yeah.
Highly regret not watching this movie in the movie theater.
Oh, I saw an advanced screen. So I was able to see the movie like 2 months before it came out.
I remember you doing that show off. I
And
didn't like you.
I got it. So I was just like, yeah. And it was D16 was his name. That was his name.
D60,
Megatron.
yeah.
D16. And I remember we go see it, me, my family. We got these events. I didn't pay for it, by the way. It was a free
Yeah.
ticket.
Yeah.
So it was free tickets. They also gave us some of the toys. They gave us the toys. They gave us the posters. I didn't really care for the toys. I ended up selling them. Sorry,
And
bro.
we're gonna have time to
Before
talk about this, Izzy.
Before I had a chance to talk to you about it, but I did sell them. I got some good money off of them. So I got to see it, and I remember when it was over, my wife said, "That was a good movie," and I'm like, because she, I think when it comes to like Transformers, the movie, the original movie, you gotta love it. That's kind of what it is. You just gotta love it. It's not in no way it's not a bad movie, or it's like, but it's just like it has a special place in your heart. That's one of those types of movies, right?
Yeah.
That there's a sentimental part to it. And when watching it, she was surprised of how good it really was and how good the storytelling of this movie was. So go check it out. That's more than enough you need to go check it out. I think it's on Peacock now, or Paramount, or one of those
I know
channels.
it's on Paramount. I have
Yeah.
Paramount now. I know it's there.
So watch it on Paramount. You can watch it for free now, because the reason why they're not making a sequel is because no one has seen it. But if people watch the streaming, I guarantee you we will get it. Because there are,
I agree.
we can always bring it back.
Or we get the war for Cybertron finally. That's what I'm waiting for. We want the
That's what
war
you're
for
waiting for.
Cybertron.
Now, our next book doesn't really have much significance, but what's important to know is that with this book, Transformers Infiltration #1, this came out in 2006 for IDW Publishing. There is a high sale of $103 for a 9.9 that came out in December 2023. Last sale of this book was $3, very fine, which is also the fair market value. 9.8s go for about $100. There's only 15 comics in the census. That's a very low number. But IDW Publishing now has the license for the Transformers. And what they ended up doing really was they take the Transformers, they put them back to their original format, where Dreamwave was dealing with more of the Japanese lore to Transformers. These were trying to put it back to the Western culture that was originally founded in the Marvel comics, and then eventually the cartoon series that we know and love. This series, there's not much to say about it other than it brought back the Transformers to their original format. And it's important to note about that, because a lot of people really wanted OG Transformers, and we weren't really getting that. IDW ended up getting the license, and they were holding on to a license up to recently, and we ended up getting some really cool comic books out of that list. Anything on this particular time in comics that you know, or anything about Infiltration, or do you know anything like that? Because no one really talks about this, and probably for good reasons, but it was a time period in comics.
I didn't read it. I didn't read any of the IDW stuff, but I would assume is that Infiltration #1 is what started it off for IDW, because they are well known. That's probably one of their more popular comic books was Transformers, and they've had so many different offshoots within the IDW world, even to a point where in the third party Transformer community, there's even third party Transformer figures based off of the IDW series, and those are very, very popular in the third party world. So I know that IDW had a very huge reason. They're one of the big reasons why Transformers came back, or at least stayed in the public's eye for as long as they did, even to a point where they were able to what's that word? I got the word. Even to the point where IDW influenced let me say it again, where IDW influenced toy makers to create toys based off of their designs. So I know that's why IDW is a big part of the Transformer world.
And speaking of what they ended up doing, they were able to collaborate with Marvel Comics, and this was the first time Transformers returned to Marvel Comics, this time with the New Avengers. So the New Avengers, the Transformers #1, this book came out in 2007 for Marvel Comics and IDW. High sales, this book is only $40 and 9.8. That was in March of 2021. Last sale of this book was $3 at a no grade. We're also going for $6 at a fine. $40 at the 9.8 is the average. There's currently 36 copies in the census. This is a 4-issue limited series, but what's more important, it's a crossover of the Avengers and the Transformers, the Autobots specifically, versus Doctor Doom and the Decepticons. This was one of those stories, and you got some great art by Jimmy Chang, who did some of the covers. It's very what's the best way to put this? Generic in its format. But how cool it is to just see the Transformers and the Avengers together.
It screams, make a movie out of this. It screams.
At least an animated movie,
yeah,
right?
like an animated. Look, if DC can make one-off, amazingly told stories of their animated movies based off of their character, why can't we get this?
Well, DC managed to make Batman and the Turtles. Why can't we just get the Transformers and the Avengers? This comic book, again, like I said, it's very bland. But what's really cool is that you got Captain America and Optimus Prime. You got Bumblebee and Spider-Man. You got Wolverine and all the other characters that goes along. And then the thing, they're working to fight Dr. Doom and the Decepticons. You got Doombots that are transforming. I'm sorry, man. This is so underrated.
And
you know what I mean?
Out of all of the villains that they could have chosen in the Marvel universe, I think choosing Dr. Doom was actually perfect for this right here. Mm-hmm. Just imagining what he could have done or what he did within this comic. I didn't read it, but it just makes sense that it's Dr. Doom. It would be weird if it was like Red Skull. It'd be weird if they went ahead and got some random, Marvel villain. But Dr. Doom, who has a really good knowledge, he's quite intelligent. He's kind of robotic himself. In my opinion, made perfect sense for this crossover.
Yeah, Dr. Doom and Megatron working hand to hand. That's come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All right. Here's another thing that IDW was doing a lot at this time. IDW were very big on licensed properties. So they were able to get multiple licensed properties. During this time, we did get another Transformers G.I. Joe, but we also did get some properties that crossover that we didn't expect. Among them, you had Back to the Future and Transformers, which is really cool. You had Ghostbusters and Transformers, another one that's really cool. You even had the fun Hasbro crossover of Transformers and the My Little Pony ponies, which I think was just cute. But the one
by the way, I read those and not gonna lie, those were fun. They were,
but the one that I think is so underrated, and it's largely because of when it came out. It came out in 2020. And it's one that I'm going to hunt out this weekend. This is what I'm going to look for. Transformers versus Terminator #1. This book came out in 2020. So if you know what 2020 is, something happened during that time. So I'm assuming that this made this book hard to get. The high sale of this book is $117.09.8. That was in October of 2023. The last sale was $10 at a no grade in February. The raws are going for about $4, which is really cover price. 9.8s are going for about $60. There's currently 48 copies in the series, but this is a 4-issue miniseries presented that was presented in another intriguing crossover, pitting the Autobots and the Decepticons, who unfortunately they have to work together in this particular instance against Skynet and the Terminators. This unexpected clash of robotic titans offered a fresh narrative premise and appeals to fans of both franchises. First of all, that cover by itself is worth purchasing.
I agree. Heroes Con, we're gonna be there, Izzy, and I think I'm gonna be looking for that right there.
You're gonna be checking out those dollar bins for Transformers Tournament because they gotta be in the dollar bins.
For sure. I agree. This comic book right here, it was such a great idea, man. I mean, it's AI versus robots with a conscience. What's the difference? Well, AI was programmed and Transformers, wait, they were kind of programmed by Primus, but it's another Transformer who's also a robot. Wait,
Well,
they were programmed by wait a minute here. Wait. Both of them were programmed by robots. Hold on, I don't know. This is
I can't wait to read this. I'm so looking forward to reading this one because again, it has to be one of those situations where people just didn't know it existed. It came out at a time where it was very difficult to buy comic books at that time. You weren't allowed to go out in the street and go to a comic book shop. A lot of comic book shops had to close down. The companies were struggling. This book came out during that time. I'm sure it got lost in the shuffle as a result of it. Now, is it a good read? I cannot tell you. I hope it is, but I want to see this happen because it is perfect. If anything, if you remember, I don't know if you ever read RoboCop versus Terminator, which was awesome. I'm getting the same vibes here with Transformers Terminator. I want this. I'm gonna find this. This is one of my hunting books for the week.
I think I'm with you. I think at Heroes Con, you need to text me like, "Hey, man, they got two.
They got two. I bought both of them.
No,
but we definitely got to go check it out, man.
For sure, man. I'm with you.
It's a 4-issue limited series. It's from IDW. How can you not see this and say, I gotta have this?
I agree.
I agree. So let's go rewind the clock a little bit, but we're going to still move forward with the actual comic books because I want to talk a little bit more about something else that's part of Transformers mythology now. And that is the Beast Machines. So we're going to look at Transformers Beast Wars #1. This came out in 2021 from IDW Publishing. The high sale was $55 for a raw copy, and that was last year. Last sale was $3 and no grade. $5 is a very good raw fair market value. $26 and 9.8. Would you believe that? $26 for 9.8. There's only 12 comics in the census. This is the first comic book appearance of the Maximals, which included Optimus Primal, Rat Trap, Chitauri, and Dinobot. They actually named one Dinobot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the first appearance of the Predacons, which is also Megatron, Tarantulas, Waspinator, and Scorponok. The Beast Machines came out in the late 1990s. I want to say like 98, 99, towards that time, because I do remember there was an animated series. I saw the Beast War. I didn't see the Beast Wars because the animation to me was still very primitive. Funny, right? Primitive time. But what I did see Beast Machines, which was the sequel to it, and I was really into it when it came out. Talk to me more about the Beast Machines and really what they're all about when it comes to the Transformers mythology, because we ended up getting the Rise of the Beast, which eventually became part of which we want to bring them in. But there's a whole generation that's their version of Transformers.
Exactly. So Beast Wars and Beast Machines are two series of the same story right there. And Beast Wars is quite arguably the best storytelling in any of the Transformers cartoons ever made. They arguably also, like you said, have the worst animation, because that was one of the reasons why I stayed away from Beast Wars and Beast Wars 2 and Beast Machines when they were out. However, going back later on in life, it's just like, you know what, I better give them a chance. I can't say I'm a Transformers fan and I'll watch it. Watching Beast Wars was like, wow, this storytelling was phenomenal. And you get fan favorites with Rat Trap, Cheetor, and Dinobot, as well as Waspinator and Scorponok. People loved those characters. To hear that IDW gave us a Beast Wars #1 in 2020, close to 20 years after the original cartoons came out, is criminal.
Mhm.
Absolutely criminal, because they were ahead of their time, but also kind of a step behind because of the animation. So when it went from Beast Wars to Beast Machines animation was slightly better, but I don't think people gave it a chance because they remember the Beast Wars cartoon being kind of clunky. And that was the biggest thing about it, is that it was clunky. But for fans who are interested or are wondering, go back and revisit Beast Wars the cartoon. Don't watch it for the anime, watch it for the storytelling. You will be pleasantly surprised by some of the little tidbits that they do give in there. Because if you're a G1 fan, there's some things that happen to that cartoon that you're like,
Yeah,
what?
especially with,
So,
so I got involved in Beast Machines. I didn't see Beast Wars,
mhm,
but I did watch Beast Machines. And as I'm watching this, because again, it was very interesting during that time, because during that time they didn't, unless you watch the cartoon, which was, well, we talked about animation. It's 3D animation at its
mhm.
earliest form. So
Yes,
that says a
exactly.
lot, right?
I mean,
Um,
like the 3D animation that we get right now with Transformers 1,
yeah,
far and above beyond
yeah,
what we originally got. Like, we're
we're
talking
talking
generations.
early Blender type of
Yeah.
stuff here.
Oh, yeah.
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 So what you saw here was, for some reason or another, and I think this is the detriment of it. People didn't know it was Transformers.
Beast Machines. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
they
thought,
knew, by the time we got to Beast Machines, they started to realize it was Transformers. But when it was Beast Wars, that's what it was. It was called Beast Wars. It wasn't called Transformers Beast Wars. It was just called Beast Wars.
yeah.
So you weren't able to associate that this was Transformers unless you saw it. When you
Yes.
saw it and you saw the names of the characters like Optimus Primal and Megatron and Dinobot, that's when you realize, oh crap, these are Transformers. But you didn't put two and two together. It wasn't until Beast Machines came out where they started bringing up the lore of the actual Transformers. Because I remember watching one episode, and I never forgot it, where Optimus Primal is talking about Cybertron, and this hologram of Optimus Prime shows up. Because that's the thing, they're not the same character. They're two separate
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah.
Even though they have practically the exact same name, and same thing with Megatron. It's crazy. It's interesting, but I thought it was so weird that they never really wanted to flat out tell you this was Transformers. It's almost as if they had a shame in it in a weird way. Like it's Transformers. You don't know until you watch the series, and I think that's kind of what hurt it a little bit. But again, like you said, this is a new generation of Transformers fans that were enjoying it, not because of the lore beforehand, but because this was something new for them, and it was different enough that you said, "I'm into it," and they were. And it had a bit of success during its time.
Yeah. A lot of people didn't like the change, right? They were like, "Oh, I'm used to original Transformers." Everyone was kind of literally stuck in their old ways. But in Beast Wars, there was an episode where one of the characters actually found the Ark
Mhm.
in the Jurassic period where they were at, and you actually see Starscream, Megatron, Optimus in the Ark, all tattered and torn, broken apart. And that's one of the times when people are like, "Oh, it's tied together." And Beast Wars and Beast Machines are tied directly to G1. It's just they're different characters from a different timeline, but they're still in the same universe, which a lot of people didn't know.
Yeah, which is all makes it cool. You got to go back and watch them again. It's one of those things we got to go back and watch. All
Yeah.
right, now we're going to fast forward again. This time we're going to go in 2023, because at this time IDW did lose the licensing of the Transformers, but a new company comes into play that no one saw coming.
Ooh.
And this was the surprise hit of 2023, and that was Void Rivals #1 that came out in 2023 for Image Comics Skybound. High sale is $90 and 9.8. That was September of 2023. $5 is the last sale of a near mint copy. It goes around $6 now. $65 is the fair market value for 9.8. There are currently 389 copies in the census. This is what we call the launch of the Energon universe, which is a shared continuity for Transformers and G.I. Joe. Show me what you got there. Show me what you got there.
I'm going to show you what I love. Okay, so Void Rivals #1. This is a black and white cover right here. This is a rare cover that I've never seen. I have almost all of the Void Rival #1 covers, just to let you know. I only brought a few of them, so this is one of them right here. Definitely got a blank, and I had someone create and put, because in Void Rivals, you get that cameo of Jetfire. So I had a buddy
Oh, that's nice.
commission Jetfire, and I was like, I need Jetfire, but I need him to look like a Gundam. And he's like, I got you. So he made him look like a Gundam.
That's awesome, dude. You had it.
Oh no! Come on!
I know, right?
Well, anyway, I'm like, yeah, my camera. And then of course, the creme de la creme of Void Rivals is, of course, the 1 in 100.
The 1 in 100. Oh, 9.8.
The 1 in 100. And the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive in a 9.8. So yes, Void Rivals. When I heard that Void Rivals was coming out, it was just like, oh, it's a new comic book, you should check it out. Oh, and then there was that spoiler like 2 months before where they're like, hey, by the way, Jetfire's in Void Rivals. Like, wait, what? And then that's when you hear about the Energon universe and the interconnecting universe, and then the comic books that come along with it. And that's when my excitement for this comic book came about, because I'm like, I didn't read all of the comic books prior to the Marvel, the IDW. I know of them, I know through friends. This gave me a chance to restart from the beginning Transformers lore from a new company, and I was extremely excited for this. So of course I was going to pick up all the Void Rival covers.
So as I recall, I had the channel existed already during this time, so we're talking about 2 years. This is 2 years ago now, and I remember the buzz behind Void Rivals, but not knowing what the buzz was. So the word on the streets was, you gotta get Void Rivals. And the book hasn't come out, the information hasn't been dropped or anything of that nature. And I remember reaching out to Josh, who, for those of you who don't know, Josh is a retailer that used to do the show. If you could go all the way back, you'll see Josh in those videos. And Josh was a retailer, and he got Void Rivals, and of course, before it was on the stands. And I tell him, I said, hey, what's this about Void Rivals? And he says, oh no, it's big. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's because, again, look at the cover, look at the title.
Yeah,
there's nothing.
It just looks like another space opera comic. Like, you wouldn't get any ideas to what it is, right?
So there's, it's Robert Kirkman, so there's something big about this. But you're thinking to yourself, okay, Robert Kirkman's doing his next Invincible, next Walking Dead story. He hasn't really touched the cosmic universe type of thing. So you're thinking to yourself, Robert Kirkman's just writing a really cool space opera story, a la Saga or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And then the word gets that it's Jetfire. And they do it so perfectly, because he just pops up and just kind of leaves.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he made...
I wake up, oh, I gotta go.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's Jetfire, which is very important, because, like I said before, how important Jetfire is to Transformers. Like, he made it more three-dimensional in storytelling, so it's kind of makes sense that it is Jetfire that does it. And it's just out of nowhere you see Jetfire, and you got to say to yourself, what the hell just happened here? What the hell book is this?
Yeah,
it's like, what? And then the word got out that Skybound Image Comics acquired the rights not only to Transformers, but to G.I. Joe.
Mhm.
And they started what they called an Energon universe. Now we got glimpses of Transformers first, of course, and then we ended up getting the word that GI Joe was coming, and now we're full into the Energon universe, which has been great, and it led to what many believe is the best Transformer storytelling that we've ever seen in Transformers number 1. This book came out just several months later, 2023. There's a high sale of $324 for a 9.9 that went on sale last year in March of 2024. Last sale of this book is $18 near mint, which is roughly around the fair market value as well. A 9.8 goes for $63. There's a lot of copies of this book. Let's be honest. There's 1,085 copies in the census of the new ongoing series, which is still going today. We're in 19 issues as of today. Daniel Warren Johnson, who, for many people, they don't know much about Daniel Warren Johnson, but he just came fresh out of Do a Powerbomb, which is a strong wrestling-based comic book. And what's really cool about the first few issues of Transformers is that he incorporated that wrestling into the comic. There are scenes in Transformers number 1 of Optimus Prime doing a belly-to-belly, a clothesline, and all sorts of wrestling maneuvers done through the art of Daniel Warren Johnson, which he really isn't your first choice when you think about Transformers art style, right? You think a lot of mech, you mentioned Gundam style, to that look where his is more gritty, and you would think he would be more of a GI Joe artist, but it turns out it worked out really well, and he does the unthinkable in this comic book. So before we spoil it, let's talk to me about Daniel Warren Johnson and Transformers.
Writing and doing the art for the first 5 issues, Daniel Warren Johnson is obviously someone who, just like many Transformers fans, is a fan. He loves the lore. He's taking care of the lore. And the one thing that I've mentioned before on several shows, several podcasts, and several, postings of my own, that Daniel Warren Johnson is giving us something new with something familiar. This is the reboot that all of us 40 plus younger Gen Xers, older millennials, fans of Transformers G1 have been waiting for. They are retelling the story, or Daniel Warren Johnson is retelling the story in such a way that is absolutely beautiful, takes care of the lore, and he's giving me something new with characters I've loved since I was a child. Hands down, my favorite comic book to this day, and I will not veer away from that comment until it gets really crappy. But 21 issues in, there has not been a bad issue of Transformers whatsoever. There might have been 1 or 2 fillers, but even those filler issues, fun. DWJ, and then later artists with Jorge Corona, phenomenal. If you're not reading Transformers, you have to.
And if you want to, you could actually read them in Global Comics. We do have a deal. Global Comics does sponsor these videos, so shout out to Global Comics. Go check out the Transformers comics in Global Comics. They're all there, the digital comics. But let's talk a little bit about that spoiler. We're going to spoil it for you. He loves the Transformers, and I was present when he was talking a little bit about this character in New York Comic Con during a panel. He may love the Transformers, but there was one Transformers he did not like as much. And he did the unthinkable with this character, who many believe is outside of Optimus, the most famous Transformer.
Yes. All of the kids my age growing up, if it wasn't Optimus, it was this one, right? It was this guy right here, because he spoke at your level. He knew he was
Show
the
him again.
little
Show him
guy.
again.
He was the little guy with the biggest heart. He was the one that everyone loved. Moms and dads loved this. This is the character your parents wanted to be your best friend.
and he had his own movie. Bumblebee is who we're talking about. What did Daniel Warren Johnson do to Bumblebee?
Daniel Warren Johnson told Starscream to go ahead and blow his face off in the first. They didn't even revive him. And poor Bumblebee, he died and then died again. I cried.
So remember we talked about G.I. Joe and Transformers, that comic book? That scene literally happened in this comic book.
Yes.
But what was the important thing about that was it was to tell you we are going to do whatever we want to do. We are no holds bar going to do the Transformer story we want to tell you.
Yeah.
And we have permission to do it. Because remember, it is still a Hasbro property, and Hasbro has to approve this. That's what a lot of people don't know about the comic books. Because Hasbro has the authority and they're licensing the comic book, they have to approve of this. So somebody went to Hasbro and said, Daniel Warren Johnson's killing Bumblebee. And Hasbro said, okay.
They did. They pretty much did that right there.
But they did some other really cool things within the series. Like Optimus gets a new arm because there's somebody missing in this whole series until much later on, and that's Megatron.
Yes. But even though we're not talking about that specific comic, it is still in the Energon Universe lore. If you read Cobra Commander, you will see where Megatron is. And that answers a lot of questions. And then it also tells you what the Energon universe really is about. Like if you read Transformers, you're honestly just getting a small portion of what the overall Energon universe story plot is. And a lot of it revolves around Megatron. And the fact that Optimus has that arm is a very big deal.
And now he finally returns, and he's connected with Laserbeak out of all characters, which is crazy sick. It is one of those things. This is old school comic books for a newer generation, because that's what old school comics. This is like Dark Phoenix Saga, where we're going the long haul for this, and we're at 20 issues in, and we still got the story going.
And there's still a lot of characters to bring in. They've just introduced recently. They've introduced Devastator. They introduced Bruticus, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? The Decepticons have their combiners. What's going on here? But then in the latest issue, I'm going to spoil it. We get Superion. They're backing up the Autobots right here, and it's fantastic. So he's really like what Izzy said. He is Daniel Warren Johnson and team. They are in it for the long haul. And I cannot wait to see what happens 50, 100, and 300 issues in. I'm collecting all of them.
And with that said, it was a long one, but it was a good one. Wow. We went through 20 comic books. Would you believe that?
That's crazy.
And each one of them have their significant importance in the Transformers lore and what we talk about Transformers. Eman, it was a blast talking about Transformers.
I didn't even read all of those comics. Just to be honest with you guys.
Yeah, because we were talking about the lore, right? That's what we're talking about.
The lore, yes, exactly. But you know, those comics have importance to the lore too.
So, Eman, before I let you go, please tell the world where they can find you and what you talk and do in your channels.
No problem, you guys. My name is Eman. You guys can follow me on Eman's World of Geek on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, where I post. I've actually transitioned over to doing a lot of Transformers, transitioning to Transformers. I've been doing a lot more Transformers stuff on my channel. I have recently dropped a review of the first arc of the DWJ Skybound Transformers, and I have arcs 2 and 3 in the works. I've already written out the script for those, so keep an eye out on my channel. I'm going to be doing a review of the arcs from the eyes of a G1 fan. What is going on in these comics compared to what happened in the comic books? And I'm just gonna tell you now that they're fantastic. But you guys have to watch the videos to hear my thoughts on that right there. I'm doing a lot more Transformers unboxing, so I'm doing a lot of toys as well. And then I do con videos, so keep an eye out on the channel. Heroes Con is coming up. I can almost guarantee Izzy is gonna be in that video, right, Izzy?
Yeah, we're gonna be there. We're gonna be, and I think we have some hunting to do. So we'll see what we find there.
We're gonna do some hunting.
We're gonna do some hunting, guys. So with that said, guys, thank you for watching this beautiful extended edition of Creator Spotlight with my special guest, Eman. We'll see you at the next one. Also, keep in mind this will be a Go Collect article. So when in a couple of weeks we will have the article up in Go Collect, so you could read all these books and you could find some more. Do your little hunting for yourself. Let me know which comic books I might have missed out, which comic books you love that are part of Transformers lore. I would love to talk more about Transformers as much as I possibly can. Maybe not as much as this guy over here, but I love to talk about Transformers. I could talk about the movie all day. And until next time, until the next Creator Spotlight, until the next trending comics, 30, 60, 90, you name it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the IzzyVerse, where there's so much more stuff going on in this channel. We hope you enjoyed it. We had a pleasure talking about it. And until next time, Excelsior. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight. And I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.